Hey everyone, and welcome back to another video from Aman Talks NRL SuperCoach. Today we're going to be going through the round 18 trade targets and burning questions. I'm recording on Thursday morning just after State of Origin. Big sad times for myself. New South Wales lost, but all the credit to Queensland, and I think for any rugby league fan in general, we did watch an epic game. But now our attention definitely turns to SuperCoach, and there are obviously some implications coming out of State of Origin, so do stick around if you enjoy the video. So the first thing that I wanted to get into was just quickly how I went in round 17, which was the last bye week, so we finally got bye week out of the way. So I scored 752 points from my 13 players, which was a little bit under what I was hoping for, given that I had 13 players, but still saw a pretty decent rank increase. So I'm now sitting at about 3,200. So this is the highest point that I've been all season, which is good. So the steady climb is continuing, and hopefully for the run home, can hopefully get maybe to the top 1,500, maybe even the top 1,000. That would be a nice way to finish, I think, after a pretty bad beginning to the season. Now, in terms of a group league shout out as well, so shout out to Dominic, who top scored in round 17 with 1,111. Then looking at our group league overall ranking, so we've got Rob from Let's Go Brandon sitting at 3rd overall ranking, and shout out to Toby as well from Toby's Troops. He was sitting at 46th, and he had an absolutely massive round 17 bye week and went all the way up to 8th overall ranking. So it's particular credit to those two, both in the top 10, and Alex just outside in overall rank of 11. But we've got Shane, Chris, James, Samuel, Guy, Joshua, and Becky all sitting inside our top 110 as well, and the top 10 in the overall group league too. And quickly, final shout out as well to our members. So if you guys aren't aware, so I've got a membership now for the channel. There's no added perks in terms of kind of extra video content. It's more just a way for you guys to show support to the channel, which I really appreciate. So we had Dino be a new member, in addition to Roosters, Toby, That Fat Guy, Mitchell, James, Gazaraki, Metalhead Smurf, Tyler, and Moz. Thank you so much, guys, for your support as well. There's a few fun emojis that you can also use during the live streams as well, which I've just got to the next to me as well. But enough of that. Let's get into the SuperCoach content. So what I wanted to do, I've kind of done this up in past videos and also live streams, was looking at some season must-haves and just looking at your kind of dream 25 for the run home. So the way that I've laid it out here is just top of my head, who do I think are the best players to own in each of the positions for the run home. Now, a lot of these names here are fairly obvious. You know, Harry Grant at your hooker, I think Azay Papali'i in front row forward, the likes of Hamoli Olukwatu in second row forward, Cleary, Nico Hines, Cam Munster, Ryan Pappenhausen. I think they're all very clear must-haves in my opinion that you're definitely probably going to want for the run home. Now, there's a few more arguable ones. I think Joe Tarpany, with the way that he's been going recently, he probably is close to a must-have. I personally don't think I'll be able to get to him, though. He's pretty expensive now at 670k. But obviously, if you can get to him without affecting your other trade plans, I do really like Tarpany, and what he's been able to produce recently has been astronomical in terms of his output and work rate. And he also has a really SuperCoach-friendly game in terms of the offloading as well. There's a few pods in here as well, you know, the likes of Dave Fifita, Cam Murray. We're going to get into them just in a little bit. They're both quite low owned. Fifita obviously had quite a long layoff with injury. Cam Murray, a lot of people sold him during the Origin period, but second row forward is a position that I think is a little bit harder to distinguish who are actually the best players to go for. Like, I think Hamoli Olukwatu is comfortably in my top 3, second row forward for the run home. The other spots around him, though, it's a little bit more difficult. You know, Ryan Madison, I would have argued, but he's missing this week as well. Ongoing rib issue, so whether or not you can classify him in the top 3, you know, with a pain management issue for the rest of the season, it's a bit more difficult in that instance. You know, you could even consider potentially a Sean Lane in there. Angus is always an option, although both mentioning Sifa Talakai and Angus Crichton. Angus played big minutes because of that Cam Murray HRA, so Murray's unlikely to play this week. Angus might be a chance of arresting as well, just given the fact that he had to play such big minutes, and you know, coming into the game, that was probably not the intention. Now, I've put Fifita in the top 3 just because I think, having, you know, gotten over this injury, he's playing 80 minutes, hopefully, fingers crossed he plays 80 minutes, he's starting. I think the guy, he's averaged 65 for this season, and he has not really had a good season, you could say that, and still managed to average 65. So I just see him as a great run-home pod as well. Other positions like the 5'8", and the second fullback spots, you know, your Dylan Brown, Scott Drinkwater in your 5'8", maybe a Tedesco, maybe a Latrell Mitchell in your fullback spot. It's a little bit more difficult, I think, to kind of figure out who's the best option there. And then in terms of centre wing, there are 3 guys, in my opinion, who I think are pretty much top tier centre wing that I think everyone should try to own for the run home. I think that's Ruben Garrick, Brian To'o, and Joey Manu. Other than that, I think, Muller Tyler's a great option. Taylor May and Thungo from the Panthers are obviously going to be really solid options given that they're playing on the edge of the best attacking team in the comp. And then you've got, this is where you can actually pod up a little bit more as well. You can go for a Val Holmes, who's a bit of a pod. You can stick with the Zach Lomax. Maybe you can double up with the Sharks and go with like a Sione Katoa as well. So there's a few options that you can consider in the center wing. But in my opinion, there's a few guys here who I think are absolute outright must-haves. If I want to say them again, Harry Grant, Zay Papali'i, Hamoli Olukwatu, Nathan Cleary, Nico Hines, Cam Munster, Ryan Pappenhausen, Ruben Garrick, Joey Manu, and Brian To'o. That's 10 guys, I think, in your 17. That these are probably the top 10 guys I'd be trying to prioritize bringing into your team if you haven't got them already. Like for me, for example, I'm looking at potentially getting Harry Grant in as soon as I can. Now, with Harry Grant, buying him this week, I was all for buying Harry Grant this week, but he played decent minutes as well in State of Origin. NRL Physio tweeted that there was some signs of him limping at the end of the game as well, so definitely going to have to be a bit of a washout just to see what happens with that. But Harry Grant, you would say, is probably going to be the top averaging hooker for the run home. And then Munster this week, should be back fit. Obviously, you'd think he'd be a bit fired up that the fact that he wasn't able to play and get State of Origin Game 3. So yeah, there's a few must-haves in my opinion there, and then there's a few really, really good options, but those other 7 spots is probably where you can maybe consider some alternatives to say what the other 10 are, because I think those 10 that I listed off probably are, in my opinion, should be in everyone's team if you can get there. So into the next section, I had a discussion point around, Dave Fifita or Cam Murray. If you had to buy one of the two this week, who would you actually end up going for? And this kind of also ties into a discussion about Ryan Madison. Is he a sell? Firstly, I'll probably just tackle the Ryan Madison question. I thought last week was a good time to sell in round 17 just because of the fact that he was missing in the crucial bye week, and you could have sold for maybe like a Sean Lane or another second or a forward. And now he's completely out of the team altogether. Like, he's not even been named. And so that doesn't really give good optimism for how he's going to fare on his return. Ryan Madison is also quite expensive at 670k. And especially, I think, in a period of time where people are looking to free up funds, going Ryan Madison down to, say, like a Dave Fifita, it gets you almost close to 100k. That could be really crucial for your trade plans, for example. So I'm for selling Ryan Madison. Obviously, if your trades are low, he probably still will be a good option for the run home, as you saw in the previous section. I still think he'll be a top kind of 4 second row forward, but just whether or not he can do as good as what he has done already up until this point with the rib issue, that kind of makes me a little bit less keen on him personally. So I would probably advise selling Madison, obviously, if you've got the trades to be able to do it. Now, in terms of who would you buy out of Fifita or Murray, so I put a poll up on Twitter. The slight majority went with Cam Murray, but now obviously after what happened in Game 3, it looks like he'll be unavailable for this week's game against the Bulldogs. And then the Rabbitohs do come into a tough run of games, but for someone like Cam Murray, who's got a base of about 52 points for the season, the draw doesn't really matter. He's a really, really solid option. I personally, though, am leaning for Fifita to buy this week. So both, you can see in the middle table, are genuine point of differences. So I have to give a quick shout out as well to SC Playbook. These are their true ownership stats for different rank tiers. And you can see that Fifita and Murray are both genuine point of difference players. Fifita especially so in the top 20,000, which makes him very, very appealing. And if you look at the run home, especially at the very back end of the season, Manly, Dragons, Knights and Warriors, that could be a month where Fifita goes 85 plus in terms of averages. I know he's been really frustrating so far this year, but he's got a 65 average in a year where we're saying it's a big down year for him. I think if he's starting again, fingers crossed he can play 80 minutes from now on as well. I think he's very close to potentially being able to average 70, if not more. And I think at that ownership and his price at 582k, it seems like it's a cheap price. So for me, I'm thinking I'm going to go Dave Fifita this week, especially with not wanting to maybe buy Harry Grant this week. There was some talk about him, having that limp post-game, and so just with the whole backing up issue, I'm not sure if I would want to get Grant this week. I might wait till next week. Therefore, I might look to actually beef up my second row forward this week and go with someone like Fifita. Just at that ownership, that draw coming up is not bad. His ceiling is insane. We all know what he did last year. It just makes it very tempting to go for Fifita this week. Now, the next thing I wanted to get into was Cody Walker. So Cody Walker's obviously had a nice little resurgence in the last few weeks. Obviously, it's coincided now with the return of Latrell. But the question is, after this round 18 game against the Bulldogs, which you can definitely hold him for, and just on that, he's now got a big ton in his rolling average, so he will make a little bit more money in the next week or so as well. You don't have to sell Cody Walker this week, but if you are looking at that run moving forward from round 19, it is a very, very tough run. Now, the Rabbitohs are a team that can still score points, even in those tough games as well, especially with the return of Latrell. So I don't think I'd be rushing into selling Cody this week. You could potentially even have him play in that game against the Storm at home, just because, you can see how do they actually fare against one of the top dogs. If he throws in a stinker, you probably won't lose money because of the fact he's got that 100 in his rolling average. And then around 20, at that point, maybe you do look to sell. But if I was going to sell Cody Walker in round 19, I would actually probably go with Scott Drinkwater just over Dylan Brown. So there's a couple of reasons why I'd probably go with Drinkwater, I think, from this point in for the run home. So Drinkwater should be goal kicking in round 18, which is helpful, given the fact that Val Holmes won't be backing up in tomorrow's game against the Sharks. I like the fact that he's dual. Scott Drinkwater's got 5'8" and fullback eligibility, which is really, really handy. And the draw for the run home for the Cowboys is fantastic. You can see from round 19 onwards, there's really not that many tough games apart from the Panthers, say, in round 25. The fact that Drinkwater is so creative, you can see his creative points below me. He's definitely getting involved with those try assists, etc., coming out of fullback. Just really looking good. I think Dylan Brown will be a rock solid option. I own Dylan Brown. I'm not actively looking to sell him for, say like a Scott Drinkwater. But if I was just buying one of the two, just on the fact that Scott Drinkwater's got the duel, and I think he's got the better draw for the run home, that would make me lean towards buying Drinkwater from this week onwards. I know last week I probably would have said Dylan Brown, but that was also because Dylan Brown was covering the bye week, and he had a really good game against the Tigers in that week as well. I've thrown in Ezra Mam here as well, because I think this might be a decision that a few people might have to make, is do they sell Cody Walker or do they sell Ezra Mam? Because Ezra Mam has been really, really good as well. I think he's got a season average of 65, and the Broncos draw for the run home as well is very good. He's got the Titans this week. Whether or not I even want to sell Ezra Mam this week, I might want to buy James Tedesco this week and sell Ezra Mam. But Mam's got a low break even, and he's versing the Titans as well. So he generally could go big this week as well and match even what Tedesco has. Then you look at the Eels. The Eels definitely concede a lot of SuperCoach points. Then you've got the Tigers, which is good. Roosters is not the best matchup, but it's fine. Then he's got the Knights. Then in round 23, you'd probably say it gets tough when he's got the Storm there. But Ezra Mam could feasibly be a hold over Cody Walker as well. And one thing to not forget, if you've got Ezra Mam, Nico Hines, and Scott Drinkwater, that's basically covered your halfback, your 5'8", and your fullback spots just via their dual status. So in a period of time when we're maybe going to see what looks like extra COVID cases, maybe some extra restings as well with injuries, having that cover could just be so handy. So there's part of me that's actually thinking that Ezra Mam, with that draw for the run home, you can obviously get more money out of selling Cody with a tough run home. And Ezra, with his dual status, he's pretty much proven so far that he can average about 60 points. Good run home. I don't see any reasons why you'd maybe want to sell Ezra Mam over, say, like a Cody Walker. The only reason I'm doing it is because I own Dylan Brown in my 5'8", and I can't feasibly sell Dylan Brown, I think, given I think he could average also very well for the run home. So it is a tough one. I know a few people have asked me, if you own Cody, if you own Ezra, which of the two would you sell for, like, say, if you were using duels to get like a fullback? Part of me is actually thinking I would maybe sell Cody, because I like the fact that Ezra is, he's got that dual status and the good run home as well. But I don't think any of these decisions need to be made this week. It's only really Ezra that I think the decision needs to be made this week. I'm really torn. I'm really on the fence about it. Especially, I was looking to buy James Tedesco from Ezra Mam. Teddy had a massive performance in Game 3 just in terms of his work rate. So I feel like the Roosters will continue to play him, though, against the Dragons. And the Dragons is also a good matchup as well. Teddy's probably the guy who I want for the run home as well. And so I'm thinking maybe selling Ezra for Teddy. But I don't feel great about it. I think Ezra could be a great option as well for the run home. Now, the theme of run home continues. Now, I thought this would be something that a few people might be interested in, is actually looking at run home point of difference players. Again, shout out as well to SC Playbook. Those percentages that you see with the ranks is the percentage ownership in different rank tiers, and it's a fantastic, this is an amazing resource to finally have this information instead of having to look at the ownership stats on the actual SuperCoach website. So do check that out there in the link below. But yeah, Daly Cherry Evans I think would be probably the best pod halfback to go for, probably coming off a high after having a great game in Game 3. The Manly Sea Eagles do have a really, really nice run of games home for the rest of the season. He's got a 73 3-round average and a 5-round 65 average. So he's putting up, you would say, keeper numbers. I think for me, the argument becomes, would you want Cherry Evans or would you want a second fullback? So it basically becomes Cherry Evans versus, say, like a Tedesco versus like a Latrell, because you're probably assuming you would swap Nico Hines either in your halfback or maybe as your second fullback to, say, like a Ryan Pappenhausen. Now, I really don't mind actually going with the Cherry Evans pod. The only reason I'm still thinking about going Tedesco is if you actually look at him, he's also not really that highly owned at the moment either, and he could also be considered relatively a point of difference too. He's only 10% owned in the top 100, 12% in the top 1,000, and 15% in the top 5,000, which for someone like James Tedesco, you'd consider pod category. So I'm still leaning with going with Tedesco. I think despite this really tough run that the Roosters have had, he still managed to average close to 60 in the last 3 rounds, 77 over the last 5. And I see the Dragons, Knights, Manly coming up. I think those are all teams that he can score well against. And then he's got another game against the Tigers as well in the future, which I think can be really good for him. Thing with Cherry Evans though, if we see this week that Garrick's not goal kicking, say for example that hip pointer issue is still hampering him, if Cherry Evans is goal kicking, I would 100% take Cherry Evans over Tedesco. That would just be my thinking. If they're both on the equal platform where neither of them are goal kicking, I'd probably take Tedesco. That's the way I would differentiate the two. In terms of your centre wing, Val Holmes is a guy who I've seen a lot of talk about recently in terms of a point of difference. He generally is a point of difference as well. 1% owned in the top 100, nothing in the top 1,000, 5,000, like it's barely any ownership there. He's at a nice price as well, 596k. Goal kicking, really good run home as well for the Cowboys. I think because, for instance, if I think about my own team, I'm not sure if I'll be able to afford Brian To'o. He's just getting really expensive. So Val Holmes at sub 600k, he won't change in price, obviously, because he's not going to play this week. Coming back fresh to a home game against the Tigers, I think Holmes will be a fantastic point of difference in your center wing. And so just looking at that draw, again, looking at those ownership numbers, the fact that he's goal kicking, yeah, I think Holmes is actually going to be a top 4 or 5 centre wing for the run home. I did include him in my Dream 25. I might just promote him up the ranking slightly, just looking at that draw home. I think he'll be a great pod in your centre wing. Now, a few other pods that we can consider. Shout out to Ian Johnson as well, who's a subscriber to the channel. He was a big fan of going with Corey Oates for round 17. Unfortunately, he got called into the Origin squad, so wasn't available for the bye week, but his replacement on the left wing scored a double. And Corey Oates has had a 5-round and 3-round average of 67. Really good run home for the Broncos, as we already spoke about with Ezra Mann. Basically no ownership as well in terms of those different rank tiers. So definitely could be a genuine pod in your center wing. But after talking about Val Holmes just then, the fact that he's goal kicking, I think Holmes is probably who I'd actually just about prefer though in your center wing if you are going for a pod. Now I've included Matt Burton here. Bit of an off the field one. That's the point of a point of difference. Main reason being is that I think 5'8", a lot of people will be looking at Scott Drinkwater and Dylan Brown. Now I will say that I think that Scott Drinkwater is a better option than Matt Burton, but if you are like one of those guys who's behind the pack and you need to go for your lower owned players, I don't mind Burton because the Bulldogs don't actually have that bad of a run home. They've got Rabbitohs, then they've got the Titans, the Knights. Cowboys is tough, but then they've got the Warriors again as well. So the next 3 of the next 4 games you'd say are pretty decent. The last 3 weeks are a little bit tougher for sure, but Burton, the fact that his goal kicking can also help him offset any kind of low scores. I guess it just comes down to your trust in the Bulldogs, but with a 5-round average of 72, we saw Burton have a really, really good spell there. And so I think he could be someone who does well for at least the next month. So, if you've got that flexibility, maybe you've got a few extra trades, maybe you go for a short-term punt on a Burton, and then maybe you flip to like a Drinkwater for the run home. That could be something that you can do if you're in that luxury spot. If you're just looking for a set and forget though, I'd probably just still give the edge to Drinkwater, but Burton still could be an option. Now, after his man of the match performance in Game 3, we kind of have to speak about Kalen Ponga as well. I've just made a quick update to his rank percentages. I had the wrong ones there previously, but he's essentially not owned by anyone in the top 5,000 or 10,000. He's 498k, so it's very cheap. He could be goal kicking as well. Milford actually had a pretty good goal kicking performance in the last game in round 17. Ponga's averages for the season haven't been fantastic, but he could be coming off a massive high. Really good run home with the Bulldogs, the Tigers, the Raiders, and the Titans. All decent games in there. Manly and the Broncos are not the easiest, but they're not games that you'd be terrified of. And then even the Sharks, he's not versing one of the Storm or the Panthers or the Cowboys for the rest of the season. So, again, if you are, looking at saving money, you can save 200k on Tedesco going with Kalen Ponga. Could be goal kicking. I probably just wouldn't go there because I don't think the Knights as a team just give me enough confidence in terms of scoring enough points. But again, if you are looking for a genuine point of difference, Kalen Ponga is a former SuperCoach gun. these are one of those times that maybe you just have to go with your gut. I know someone on Twitter was really keen on Ponga. I would say specifically to you, apologies, I'll try to get your name in the future. If you've got a gut feeling about Ponga, you watched that performance last night in Origin Game 3, I think he's a good point of difference. Alright, so we'll quickly take a look at the market watch, the top 10 trade ins and outs, and we'll see if there's anyone who I haven't spoken about yet. So in terms of the top trade ins, we've got Deluis Hoita. Now, I don't necessarily know if he's going to be the best purchase for this week. Corey Oates, I believe, is named in the extended reserves for the Broncos, and I think he could very easily come back. He didn't really have that much involvement in Game 3, so don't really think this is a great, enough purchase. I mean, look, he could be an option as enough, but if you are looking to buy enough, I would just recommend going with someone who's dual listed if that's the case. Joe Tarpany, we spoke about him earlier. I think he'll be a very good option for the run home, probably your second best front row forward. At 671k though, I just don't know if I can afford it. Fanua Pole, I think from the Tigers, he's named on the bench. He's probably a decent option if you are looking for a downgrade. Say in your front row forward, say if you're still holding onto a Payne Haas and you could make the trade last week, if you want to save like 300k going down to Fanua, I don't mind that because I think there'll probably be a chance that he stays in at least in the 17 for the run home. And personally, I'm not a big user of the vice captain loophole, so I don't mind if this guy just has to, get like 30, 35 a week. At a pinch, if your front row forward goes down and you need to play him and he can knock out 35 or 45 points, it's better to do that than to have no backup in your front row forward who doesn't play and to cop an actual genuine auto emergency. So I don't mind going with him as a downgrade purchase as well. Now, Latrell Mitchell, fourth most purchased player when I last pulled these numbers. It doesn't surprise me. I didn't really go into the Tedesco versus Latrell debate in this video. I kind of went through that quite a bit in last week's video because I felt that if you were going to buy Latrell, last week was the week to get him because you wanted him for that bye week. Now, if Tedesco's playing for this week, I think the two of them head to head, I would just about say that Tedesco still might outscore him, but I'm not willing to bet any money on that because Latrell's goal kicking, which is really helpful. We know I did a bit of an analysis on that as well last week that he can score well in those big, against those big teams, and the goal kicking really does help too. So look, I can't fault someone buying Latrell. I'm personally just looking at going with Tedesco instead though. And one thing to finally talk about with Latrell, he's not even really a pod. So if you look at his numbers on the SC Playbook website, he's actually owned by about 50% of the top 100 players now. So he's not even a pod. Tedesco is more of a pod than Latrell. That's just another thing to think about if you are looking for more of your lower owned players. Zach Hosking, I don't think he's that bad of a 2RF downgrade. He's starting again this week, so he might be good cover in your second row forward. And then I'd expect that he probably would drop out of the 17 altogether. Otherwise, coming off the bench, he looked pretty busy, good work rate. He could be again one of those handy guys in your second row forward if he just manages to nab a bench spot down the line. Now, Harry Grant, as the sixth most purchased player, I do think he's a definite season keeper. I just don't think I'd be buying him this week now. I've actually just seen a tweet from NRL Physio. This is live in the video as well. So NRL Physio has said on Harry Grant that Harry Grant copped a cork to the glute, not a major injury by any means, but it will be painful over the next few days. Raises some doubt over his availability for this weekend. Most players able to return within a week, but a 4-day turnaround adds extra challenge. Just based on what Physio is saying there, I just don't think Harry Grant is probably the best buy this week, just with that tight turnaround and the fact that he did seem to pick up a cork, and he might play managed minutes. Obviously no Brandon Smith, so Grant will probably still play some minutes, but they've got Tyron Wishart there to cover as well. Joey Manu, I think, is a fantastic buy for this week. Specifically on Manu, we'll get onto it in just a little bit. I think he could be an amazing vice captain, even a captain option this week. He's been named at 5'8". If, say, for example, Tedesco doesn't back up and Manu goes to fullback, I think if you don't own him, I would be trying to prioritize him because this guy is scary as a non-owner. He's just running the ball for days, tackle breaks. He's just got such a SuperCoach friendly game at the moment. So Manu, I think, is a great option to buy, even at 708k. I know it's expensive, but I think he's one of those guys who is a must-have for the run home. Dave Fifita and Cam Murray, we kind of spoke about a bit already. I expect Murray's numbers to drop off a little bit now after the game 3. And Fifita, I do like as a buy for this week, as we outlined previously. And Cam Munster, I think, again, he will be the top averaging 5'8". So no qualms about buying Munster this week at all. Now, in terms of the sells, a lot of these guys do make sense. So, like, Will Penasini hasn't done anything too wrong, but the fact that he's now 455k, looks like he's probably peaked in price. It's probably a good time to sell now. Like, for example, It's not ideal that Val Holmes isn't playing this week, but Penasini to Val Holmes could be a great trade that you could do maybe even next week if you can delay it and you've got enough money in the bank. Brandon Smith suspended for 3 games due to his outburst at the referee, so I think he's got to go. He's not really adding too much value there. 377k is a bit of an awkward price. Hopefully you've got deals to be able to flip him to maybe like another 2RF. Could maybe go Brandon Smith to, if you don't want to buy Harry Grant this week, you could consider someone like a Reece Robson. Good run home, should be playing 80 minutes. You don't have to must sell him this week. You can maybe wait a week and then sell Smith to Grant next week when Grant is back fit and firing. We spoke a little bit about Ezra Mam, so I won't talk about him too much, nor will I speak too much about Ryan Madison. I do think that Madison is a fine sell. Just quickly on Payne Haas, I still think he's okay to sell, despite the fact that I think last week was better. Doing Haas to Fanua Pole was a good trade to make some money. This week it's still okay, but he probably will be back next week. And after 2 weeks of rest, he might get back to that 60-65 average. So I don't think it's as easy of a decision to sell this week, but I can understand the sell. And I don't, if someone was saying, should I sell Payne Haas for say like a Dave Fifita, via duels, I'd probably say that's a good trade to do. Grant Anderson being sold, I'm personally just keeping him on my bench. He's too low of a price for me to try to convert him into a genuine gun. Karaz is a fair sell as well. Look, he's got a good run home as well, as we touched on with Matt Burton. So I think he's one of those options who could be like a 6th, 7th centre wing just for some depth. But I think if you can convert him into one of your premium guns like a Val Holmes next week, I think that's a really good trade to do. Talakai is an interesting one. So I sold Talakai last week. My reason for selling Talakai was he was going to miss round 17, really, really short turnaround for round 18, and he only played off the bench for the Blues, so we still don't know yet if he'll back up for round 18. But let's say hypothetically, if he did miss this week, I would probably sell, because then in round 19, he's got Penrith, and you can use his money to do a lot. You can do like a Talakai to a Fifita. This week, I think that's a good trade to do. And so, look, I sold Talakai last week, so I'm okay with selling him this week as well. Josh King, I think, fine to sell. He did his job for round 17, but he definitely isn't adding too much value now, so he can go. Max King is a strange one. I'm guessing people are selling Max King for, say, like a Joe Tarpany. I'm actually running Max King as my second front row forward. I'm happy with my team, except my front row forward is looking a little bit weak at the moment, but Max King is still starting, and if you can punch out 55 to 60, I'm happy enough with that for my second front row forward. The fact that he's now got dual is very handy, so I can see if some people are selling to like your outright guns, maybe you're selling to like a Fifita, maybe a Tarpany, but apart from going for your genuine guns, I'd probably just consider holding Max King. Now, quickly taking a look at round 18 captaincy, this week is actually a very, very tough week to figure out who is the captain options, because a lot of the top teams have really good matchups. Now, I think Nico Hines will probably be the default vice captain option for the majority of people, given that he plays the first game, goal kicking, he accumulates a lot of points. I'm actually thinking I might not, though, vice captain Nico Hines. I'm thinking of maybe going a little bit different. So the Roosters play on the Saturday, so I'm thinking about maybe going a vice captain on, say, like a Joey Manu. Just because that might also mean if we get confirmation, say that, maybe either one of Tedesco, say Tedesco doesn't back up, Manu goes to fullback, I would be seeing, I think him would be a great vice captain option this week. We saw in that bye week in round 13 when he was the fullback, he scored like 130 points with 1 attacking stat. That's the kind of ceiling this guy has. So I'm personally actually maybe looking at a vice captain on like a Joey Manu or a James Tedesco if he's fit. There is even an option to outright captain one of those two against the Dragons. The Dragons are one of the teams that do concede a lot of 100+ point scores as well in terms of SuperCoach points. So definitely a team that you can target. Ben Hunt should back up for them, which should help them out as well. But I think the Roosters, they need to go hard for the top 8. A home game against the Dragons, I think one of Manu or Tedesco could do really well. I quickly didn't speak about the Eels boys. Moses, for example. If you're a Nico Hines owner and a Mitch Moses owner, I'd probably vice captain Moses over Nico Hines. The fact that he's goal kicking as well, same as Hines, but he's got a better matchup on paper, has a big ceiling. We saw that last week. I'd be very confident in vice captaining like a Mitch Moses over a Nico Hines. I don't think I'm going to vice captain the like of a Dylan Brown or an IPAP over Hines though. I think Hines he's got more consistency in hitting those bigger scores than probably say those two. But Moses is a different story because he goal kicks. Now, some other interesting options. So Cherry Evans and Ruben Garrick against Newcastle. That could be a high point scoring game for the pair of them as well. So there could be options even for a captaincy or vice captaincy. but I'm leaning a little bit more towards the Roosters players, specifically Manu. I've just got a feeling with Manu this week that he's going to do really well. And so he's who I'm looking at vice captaining, and maybe you can do a pod captain on Cherry Evans or Garrick. I'm still thinking though, in terms of my captaincy, playing it relatively safe on the Sunday and going with one of Munster or Pappenhausen. At the moment, I'm just thinking Pappenhausen. The guy, yes, he had a down week last week, but we haven't seen any news, I think, on how he pulled up from last week. He seems to be good to go. The fact that his goal kicking, I think he scored 5 tons in 11 games this season. So he's got a consistency of hitting 100 plus scores. The fact that Munster's back, I think, will really help the Storm out. So Munster, Hughes, and Pappenhausen. Grant may feature as well. But I think this will be a game. I know Canberra have been doing well, but the fact that Storm are playing at home, it just makes me think that Pappenhausen, he's safe for like a 75 points. So I'm personally looking this week at doing Vice Captain Manu, Captain Pappenhausen. If you've got Latrell, I think he could also be a great captain option as well. I think they played the last game of the week away to the Bulldogs. Goal kicking as well, so he's got that ceiling. But for me, Pappenhausen, he just has that allure about him. Even Munster, I think, will have a big game. But that's how I'm looking at the moment for my vice captain and captaincy options. Alright guys, going to end the video there. I'm not going to go into my team in this particular video. What I'm hoping to do is on the Friday, we'll do a lockout Q&A stream, and I'll go through my team at that point and my trades. But obviously, do follow me on Twitter as well. I do talk a lot about my trades and my team there as well. But I definitely will, kind of discuss my team and trade options in hopefully that Friday's live stream. My early thoughts we're looking at Ezra Mam to James Tedesco, and then Zach Lomax via duels to Dave Fifita. So that's what I'm looking at the moment in terms of my trades. And then I was pretty clear in terms of vice captain and captain. Could be vice captain Manu or Tedesco, and then could be a captain on Pappenhausen. Alright guys, going to end the video there. We'll get this out as soon as I can on the Thursday. Hope you all enjoyed it. If you did, please give it a like and a thumbs up. And do please subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, if you did enjoy it. See you all in the next one.